In this video, we'll take a high-level look at the various components of Microsoft security offerings. From email and endpoint security to identity protection and cloud app management, we'll explore how these solutions work together to safeguard your IT environment from modern cyber threats. At Ontinue, we offer 24/7 managed detection and response, purpose-built to help organizations that leverage the Microsoft Defender control plane resolve incidents faster while saving time and money. To learn more, visit us at ontinue.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome back to another video with more insights in the world of cybersecurity. Today, we are going to take a step back from the technical details and the technical aspects and have a high-level look at the world of Microsoft security. We are going to look at the different components that they have today and how they click together. What's the responsibility of each of these components? And how do they fit in the bigger picture? And before I dive straight to the point, I want to take a step back and look at how Microsoft stepped into that world of cybersecurity. To set the scene, first of all, a small story that you might have already heard in the past or are familiar with, but this is just to set the scene. So today, the world of cybersecurity, it has changed. 10, 20 years ago, we had a different approach, a completely different approach towards security, which we would now call traditional approach. This is the approach where your company is your castle, you could say, and you have your walls around your company, which are then your firewalls, proxy, your IDS, IPS, and so forth. And within your castle, you have all your IT assets. And any communication that comes from the outside to the inside, or the other way around, passes through your walls, passes through your firewalls. And this was a very traditional approach to security, which worked very well back in the day. So at that point, the perimeter of your IT landscape was the firewall. That was the edge. Now, this approach no longer works today, or is no longer efficient because everything has changed. Today, you are having a lot of SaaS applications. You are having people, employees, who use their own devices, BYOD. They are using cloud services and cloud storage. So the assets, they are no longer within your perimeter, within your company walls. Firewall is no longer enough today. Today, we are more focusing on identity, as this has now become the new perimeter to focus on and to secure. All this change has, of course, also brought a lot of new challenges. And the more challenges have also made everything more complex and difficult to manage. And when there are challenges, you can solve them with things like good processes. You need good expertise, but also good tooling, good technology. I know technology is not everything, but it is important. And as a result, the market has come with solutions. And there are many solutions out there. There are different vendors that offer solutions in specific domains, ranging from endpoint protection to identity protection, email protection, IoT, and so forth. And some vendors, they're better than others. But typically, they do the job well. The problem is that attacks have become way more complicated, and those solutions, they don't talk with each other or very limited. And since attacks have become more complicated, more multi-staged, it is very important that they can talk with each other, that they click together. Because otherwise, the security analysts needs to take all the signals individually from each solution, put them together and make a story out of it. And that is very difficult and time consuming. So that is where we are looking for a solution that integrates, or for an option that integrates all these different components and make one story for the security analyst. That is exactly where Microsoft saw a big gap in the market and stepped into that market to then release a set of different security solutions. Now, before I explain these security solutions, I want to briefly explain or demonstrate the typical flow of a cyber attack, which I will then use to explain the Microsoft solutions. This flow is nothing complicated. It's just for setting the scene. So what we can see is a user can go to a certain website and then get a virus there, get a malware via that website. Or perhaps more popular is phishing email, where you have then a user clicking on a attachment or on a link, downloading something, downloading a malware, whatever it is, getting something very bad on your computer, on your endpoint, where it is going to exploit some vulnerability. Or it's perhaps also going to try to connect to the server from the attacker. And the attacker's goal is typically to get a foothold between the door, to get that first user, that patient zero, typically a user with very little permissions, but it's a very good start. Alternatively, the attacker can also try to target this identity direct, perhaps with a brute force on the credentials. Now, as soon as patient zero is compromised, we see very typical activities happening. Activities where the attacker is going to conduct reconnaissance and trying to find an identity with more permissions. And if you're really out of luck, this could be a domain administrator, which would mean that your domain is fully compromised and that the attacker can do whatever he or she wants. And depending on the agenda of the attacker, he or she will also try to exfiltrate sensitive data. So this is quite straightforward, nothing complicated. This is a very typical attack, and this has not changed very drastically over the years. And Microsoft, they have released a set of different security solutions that provide defense in depth. That means that in every step of this flow, they want to have a solution. So if we start here on the left side, in this world of phishing emails, that is where they released Defender for Office 365. And Defender for Office 365 helps you, first of all, protect your email. Now, when you have email today in Exchange Online, you have already a basic protection called Exchange Online protection. And whether you like it or not, it is enabled. You can tweak the policies, you can figure it differently, but it is on. And it will protect you against a vast amount of attacks, but not everything. If you really want to protect against advanced attacks, spear phishing attacks, zero-day attacks, that's where you need something more. And that's exactly where then Defender for Office 365 comes in. On top of that, it has a lot of features that go beyond the basic protection that Exchange Online offers. For example, sandboxing of attachments or link protection in emails. So that means if a user clicks on a link, it is always first validated by a reverse proxy for Microsoft, and it will block the user from proceeding if Microsoft has deemed this link malicious. Now, the name of the product is Defender for Office 365 and not something else. For a very simple reason that all of these functionalities, they can be extended to SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, and Office 365 applications because threats are also present in these applications. Perhaps you are sending a link via Teams chat, or you have an Excel file that is uploaded to SharePoint. And that Excel file has malicious macros. So if you then share it via a link within the company, other people will be opening that Excel file. If we then move forward here to the right side, to the level of endpoint, that's where Microsoft developed Defender for Endpoint. And Defender for Endpoint is available in two forms. There is a Plan 1 and there is a Plan 2. And Plan 1 is strictly speaking the antivirus component, which protects you against the bad things. And it also has a little EDR component. So a little endpoint detection and response component that allows you to conduct detection and response. Now, this is a light version. For example, it does not support all the response capabilities of a full-fledged EDR solution. And if you want a full-fledged EDR solution, then you can choose for Plan 2. If we then move forward, then we get into the space of identity. Very important. And many customers, they are in a hybrid setup with the Microsoft stack. That means they have local Active Directory, which is synchronized with Microsoft's Entra ID. That also means, or that means in other words, that they have identities both on premises and in the cloud. So ideally, you really want to have that level of protection in both these areas to protect, first of all, your identities that are stored in Entra ID. And there Microsoft offers something called Entra ID identity protection. And that's really the solution that you can turn on, and it will monitor suspicious logins, potentially compromised users if they're signing on from a location at the other side of the world and they normally don't come there, or if their credentials are leaked on the dark web. That's the kind of notifications that you can expect here. Now, in order to protect against more traditional phases, reconnaissance, lateral move, domain persistence, that are all happening on your local Active Directory, Microsoft has also offered a solution which is called Defender for Identity. So think about attacks like pause the ticket, pause the hash, DC shadow attacks, and so forth. And then finally, there is a fifth component, which is called Defender for Cloud Apps. Defender for Cloud Apps is that product that helps you getting a hold of the usage of cloud applications in your organization. So first of all, it will give you visibility in what cloud applications are being used, whether those are enterprise managed or not. So you can have enterprise managed applications like Box, Dropbox, and so forth, but also non-managed applications like WeTransfer or Facebook are very popular by end users for exchanging files, but they're not loved by IT because of the lack of control IT has over it. So visibility is the first thing. Second thing is getting control over these applications, having visibility in who is using them, and then looking at the data that's going to it, but also putting controls in how data can flow to these applications. So with that, with all these components, you really have this end-to-end protection here that covers the whole attack chain. And Microsoft initially had these solutions released, each as a standalone product with their own portal, but that's already in the past. That's no longer the case. Microsoft has now fully unified these solutions in one central place, which for those already perhaps familiar is security.microsoft.com. If you go to that link, you get everything unified, which means all your alerts come together. All your alerts are even correlated by the system into incidents. So alerts that belong together, they are grouped into incidents to make your life easier. And also all your response activities that are possible, they are consolidated in one interface. And this interface was then called Microsoft 365 Defender. And this is, in fact, XDR solution, a word that you might have heard already a few times by now, extended detection and response, XDR. And that is what an XDR solution is, a solution that brings signals from different domains together and allows you then to conduct detections, investigations, and response actions. So very important, XDR is something that goes across domains. EDR is just endpoint, nothing else. And customers, they often confuse those two abbreviations. It is not the same. Microsoft was in fact the first company to come with a real XDR solutions. Other vendors, they claimed at some point to also have an XDR solution, but that was often not the case. They often had something that was just endpoint or endpoint and a little bit of something else, but that's about it. Now, of course, the market has not been sitting still. They have also further developed, and today you can also find other XDR solutions. But at the end of the day, Microsoft still has today the most comprehensive XDR solution. And I will show you in the next few minutes why I'm saying that. Now, moving on, let's call all of this then Microsoft 365 Defender. Let's bring all of that together in one cube. And we call it Microsoft 365 Defender. Now, perhaps the next question that you might have or already have is, yeah, this looks great, good, but what about all the other sources that I have? What if I have firewalls? What if I have proxies? What if I'm using other clouds? Or perhaps some of you have your own threat intelligence that you correlate and deal with. And that's when we come into that space of a SIEM solution, a security information event management solution. This is the kind of technology that allows you to bring logs, alerts, signals, all of that from different solutions together and have one bird's eye view across your organization. It allows you to correlate everything, allows you to investigate it. And in the world of Microsoft, that SIEM solution would be Microsoft Sentinel. Microsoft Sentinel is a cloud-native solution that you can use. And in fact, you can easily natively send any alerts coming from Microsoft 365 Defender to Sentinel. Now, you're not obliged to use Microsoft Sentinel. You can also use another SIEM solution. It's also possible. Now, at this point, you might have another question. You've seen Microsoft 365 Defender. Now, this is very focused on the modern workplace. And we have talked very little about infrastructure. And that was in the past a gap until Microsoft came with a solution called Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And Microsoft Defender for Cloud is really a solution that is focused on monitoring threats against your workloads. So these can be threats in Azure, where you perhaps have SQLs running, containers, Azure Key Vaults, and each of these have their own threats, like SQL injections or suspicious key activity. As a result, you need a solution there to monitor it and to get recommendations to improve it. And similarly, you might also have resources on premises or resources in Amazon, Google, or in another cloud. And Microsoft Defender for Cloud goes across all these environments. It really covers your whole infrastructure. And so this was then Microsoft's XDR solution for the infrastructure side. Now, at this point, when you look at this picture, we see three major blocks, still three different solutions that are still separate from each other. They are still in a separate portal, separate environment. In particularly here at the bottom, we have actually two XDR solutions, modern workplace and infrastructure. So Microsoft has done really great efforts and has now allowed the integration of alerts that come from Defender for Cloud to flow into Microsoft 365 Defender. This means that now in one portal, you can now get all the alerts from both modern workplace and infrastructure. Now, as a result of that, the names make no longer sense. So Microsoft has rebranded this into what is now called Microsoft Defender XDR, which brings a really unified XDR solution. And this is exactly what I mean. Microsoft, they has the most comprehensive XDR solution. And to bring it one more step further, Microsoft has done additional efforts, and now you can choose to integrate the SIEM solution, which is Microsoft Sentinel, into the XDR solution. And that way you really have that one place where you can find all these solutions nicely together. And this is a very high level overview that I gave, a high level overview of all the Microsoft security components. Now, of course, there is always more. For example, there is Microsoft Copilot for security, which is an extra thing that you can get if you would like to be at the forefront of innovation and use modern AI to understand incidents that are happening or to reverse engineer scripts, or if you want to receive detailed reporting, perhaps in the form of a PowerPoint. And then Microsoft Copilot for Security is a really nifty tool. So imagine you need a report. Imagine you're a manager, you need a report, but you don't want to bother your team to make such a report. So you can ask Security Copilot what you want, and it will give you that. Or perhaps you have just hired a junior with very little experience. It's not always easy to find senior personnel, or there is not always a budget for it. So imagine you hired a junior with very little experience. Copilot is a nice way to get that knowledge and to get that expertise to that junior without the junior constantly having to ask the most senior person for support. And there is still much more that Microsoft offers. There is a whole compliance and data security side of things as well with Microsoft Purview and Microsoft Priva. And there is also Device Manager, Microsoft Intune, which each of these are solutions on their own. They have their own subcomponents and they are worth a video on their own. But from a security perspective, from a security workload protection perspective, this is the full high-level overview. And hopefully you can now walk away from this video with a much better understanding of the different components. Now, of course, at this point, we did not talk about licenses. This was just the overview. Each of these components, they each have their own licenses. Some are user-based, some are based on a consumption model, but also this topic is worth a video on its own, and that won't be for today. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And if there is any questions or you would like to discuss something, feel free to reach out to Ontinue. Thank you.